Reactions continue to trade the revelations from the Pandora Papers, a new cache of 12 million documents that has made public the hidden wealth, tax avoidance, and in some cases, money laundering by some of the world's richest and most powerful. We're now being joined by a lawyer and regular guest on this show, Liborous Oshoma. Liborous will be giving us his legal opinion on the issues that have been thrown up by the Pandora Papers and what Nigerian laws say on offshore investments and beneficial assets ownership. Welcome to the show, Liborous Oshoma.
My pleasure.
Well, quickly, the main question is very simple. What are the legal issues involved? Yesterday we had here Mr. Peter Obi, former governor of Anambra State, and he said that as far as he is concerned, he's done no wrong whatsoever. Issues raised by some publications about the fact that he had an offshore account or has an offshore account. He said, look, we're immaterial. And he tried to explain this. But I guess many of our viewers would like to know, are there legal issues involved?
Yes, I would try to, as much as I can, de-emphasize individuals and look strictly at the positions of the law as regards the code of conduct for public officers, and then also Section 306 on resignation, because our laws are observed more in breach by public officers across board. It just not just about one person, but you find a lot of them, especially the code of conduct for public officers. If you look at the provisions of the code of conduct, you find out that you begin to ask yourself, are we really observing these laws? And is the code of conduct tribunal actually, or that the body itself, are they actually conducting investigations into assets declared by public officers? But quickly, and the reasons for this declaration are simple, very simple, for tax purposes, and then to also understand if a public official had corruptly enriched themselves using, the instrumentality of the office. And so that's the essence for declaration. And if you look at the provisions of, and like Tundu will always say, I'm always with my constitution. And so if you look at the provisions of the code of conduct, for example, paragraph 3 prohibits prohibition of foreign accounts. That's the president, vice president, governors, deputy governor, ministers of the government of the federation, commissioners of government of the state, members of National Assembly of House of Assembly, and such other public officers or persons as the National Assembly may by law prescribe shall not maintain or operate a bank account in any country outside Nigeria. That's paragraph 3. If you now go to paragraph 11, declaration of societies, subject to the provisions of this constitution, every public officer shall within 3 months after the coming into force of this code of conduct, or immediately, not before taking oath of office, immediately after taking office, and thereafter, at the end of every 4 years, and at the end of his term of office, submit to the Code of Conduct Bureau a written declaration of all his properties, assets, and liabilities, and those of his unmarried children under the age of 18. Then, if you now go to paragraph 13, I'm taking time to itemize this. A public officer who does an act prohibited by this code through a nominee, a trustee, or other agents shall be deemed ipso facto to have committed a breach of this conduct. So it has nothing to do with whether it was a nominee or my agent, provided the ultimate beneficiary is that public officer. And lastly, on this, the essence mainly is declaration. And once these assets are declared and the tribunal has opportunity of, fact-checking them, no offense has been committed. It is not a crime to have, like it's noted even in the Pandora's Papers, it's not a crime to have trust companies. In some cases, even in Nigeria, people set up, for probate purposes, people set up trust companies to manage assets, even for infants. But the situation where the moment you become public officers, the law requires, and then if you look at the form in itself, Just that I couldn't quickly lay my hand on a copy. But if you see it, I know doctor had sent the form. If you look at the form itself, it has provisions for agents, nominees, trustees, wives, children who are below 18. And so there are no exemptions, there are no provisos to exempt anybody who maybe, okay, you were hurriedly sworn into office and then or that you couldn't have declared your asset because as at the time you were being sworn into office, but you still had time. And then lastly, I said I was going to talk about section 306 on resignation. Quickly, if you look at subsection 2, resignation of any person from any office established by this constitution shall take effect when the writing signifying the resignation is received by the authority or persons to whom it is addressed, or by any person's authority, by the authority or persons to receive it. So it does not talk about resignation by phone. So this is a benchmark for resignation in as far as definition of resignation for public officers, whether from private companies or public companies, is concerned. So it does not talk about resignation via phone, or I called somebody to inform the person that I'm resigning. It talked about resignation, handwritten or typewritten. And basically, that's why I started by saying that our laws, our public officers observe our laws more in breach. But there are some persons, like even though Oyedepo is not a public officer, the response I read was that most of these assets were also declared by him, and there were no use of nominees. And then also the case of the MPA acting chairman, Coco, also that they were assets acquired in the course of his stewardship as GM in was it Zenith Bank or so, and then subsequently that the assets were declared in his assets declaration forms, and that there were no use of nominees, that the trust companies were established by both him and his wives, and the property in question was a mortgage property taken before he became ED in MPA. Once they are declared, there is no law had been violated. And that's why, quickly, I must say, even though I said I would de-emphasize, that's why the case of Peter Obi, is making the round. And then the case of Oyetola, the governor of Oshun State. So that's why those cases are making the round, because these are properties, these are assets that were not declared. And then lastly, quickly, I always say lastly, on the issue of having shares in a company that owns shares in another company. Once the shares are declared, even if it is 1%, even if it is 0.5% of your shares that is still existing in that other foreign company, it must be declared.
Right, you made a really good point that political office holders tend to observe laws in the breach. How should that culture be addressed? How should it be changed?
Yeah, the problem we have in this country is not lack of laws, but the willpower to implement our laws. That's just the problem. And that's why people will tell you, when you cross the borders, there is no abexa. A policeman will control you in other countries, and the next thing he brings out his pen and his tickets, issues you, and there are procedures. If after some time you don't pay, it's accrues interest, and then someday your vehicle might even be confiscated. But here, the man will, you violate a traffic offense, the first thing is abexa. The man is the police enforcing officer wants to collect bribe, and then the next thing you bring religion. You're not a Christian, you're not a Muslim, leave him. So we need to change our attitude. And then people saddled with the responsibility of implementing and enforcing our laws should not... There shouldn't be this attitude of looking at faces, who is involved. Once he's a member of the opposition, and then the law should be implemented. Once he's a member of the political party, then your sins are forgiven. And then our attitude as a people, as Nigerians, also needs to change. Because these people are not quarreling. They are friends. Yesterday I saw a video of, what do you call him, Senator Dino Melaye and Senator Ojuzo Kalu in a private jet. And one is PDP, the other one is APC. They are not quarreling. They are all friends. That's why they can cross from one party to the other.
Sorry.
But
Sorry to interrupt you, Liborous. We need to take a short break. After that break, we'll return quickly, and Liborous Oshoma is still here to discuss the legal implications of the Pandora Papers. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Liborous Oshoma is still here with us, giving us his legal opinion on the issues arising from the publication of the Pandora Papers and what Nigerian laws say on offshore investments and beneficial assets ownership. Well, Rufai,
all right,
it's your turn.
Thank you so much. So I just want more clarity on this declaration, because you see, this Pandora paper, the waves are everywhere in the world. In fact, even in our neighboring Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, the case is hotting up now against the Prime Minister, Patrick Ashi, about this declaration too. That, he had a shell company abroad, he didn't declare and all of that. And in fact, there's a push for him to leave. So we're looking at casualties. So take for instance, if you declare shares, you have bank shares, for instance, and do you have to declare any further shares owned by the bank, in other entities? Is that the case?
No, the case here is once you declare your interest in a bank, if the bank owns shares in a million other banks, it's not your business. It is for the code of conduct now to verify, the banks where that, entity owns other interests. But if it is proven that outside the shores of this country, even if it's half shares or one shares, that you own interests in any of those other entities where that bank owns shares, you must declare it. The essence is to avoid secrecy.
So let me get something clear. So take, for instance, most Nigerian banks have subsidiaries abroad.
Yes.
Some even in America, some in other parts of the world. So if you have a share in the bank, must you not declare?
No. Most Nigerians also, apart from owning shares in the banks here in Nigeria, those subsidiaries abroad, they still go to own like 1% shares, 0.5% shares, 5% shares. And you now say, because I have declared my interest in this bank, the Nigerian parent company, that there is no need for me to declare my other interest in the subsidiaries abroad. If there is no interest at all, then there's no need for declaration. The law didn't say you should now begin. That would be even an offense because it is anticipatory. But the moment there is an interest, no matter how minute that interest is, it must be stated in that form. There are columns for it. And also, like I always say, people say, oh, look, once they are trusts or once they are nominees, that there is no need to declare them because you are not the one directly holding those interests. But paragraph 13 of the Code of Conduct also covers that field because they know that sometimes, in most cases, Nigerians would want to hide some of these interests and shares, using nominees. Even in Nigeria, it used to happen until recently when the Corporate Affairs Commission decided to unveil registration of companies. What they used to do was, they do it here. So you just set up a company using fictitious name and fictitious addresses. The people don't even exist. You put one Jackson Abati. It does not exist anywhere. And then the company is registered, and then there were no BVN. So tomorrow you're filling your asset declaration. You say, well, this company is not owned by me. My name is not there. I don't have any interest. Meanwhile, you are the one pulling the strings behind. But what CAC, the Corporate Affairs now did was, for you to register a company now, all the shareholders and directors must have proof of identification. Okay. And so those proofs of identification at least will establish a face. And then with the biometric verification with the banks, it's easy to trace the bank account and assets of these people. So now what they do, they take these assets abroad, go to British Virgin Islands, where, it's a tax haven. You create nominees. Because the question is, why would you be using nominees to... Your asset here is for savings, it's your money. And why will you want to use nominees that you don't want people to know? If you are not a public officer, that's your business. If all of these were done while you were in private business, fantastic. But the moment you came into public office, whether a day after, 2 days after, 3 days after, once they are declared, nobody will raise eyebrow, because all you will say would be, just go back to your asset declaration form and say, this is it. All of these interests were declared in compliance with the provisions of the law. Because also, quickly, because also, if these assets, the essence of declaring even 4 years after, so that in the event that some of these assets these funds were funds obtained from Nigeria and sent out, and then the FIRS will have opportunity, a window to look into the tax, the actual tax paid on those funds, since they were funds that were generated from Nigeria.
Well, we need to look at other aspects, but I don't know whether we still have enough time. We've been talking about public officials, and you said earlier on that the main issue is about declaration.
Yeah.
But if you look at all those papers, Panama Papers, Paradise Papers, now Pandora Papers, there are private individuals involved who have nothing to do with government, right? Don't they have the right to their own privacy, to keep their money, assets, wherever they wish, anywhere in the world? And then the issue about the role of lawyers. Many of these transactions were processed by lawyers, both locally and internationally. So why is anybody talking about the ethical dimension in terms of what lawyers do? What's that company again? Fonseca also.
Mossack Fonseca.
Yes, these were lawyers who were the ones, and even in these Panama Papers, lawyers even providing services for the sovereign in the UK have been implicated in the matter. And is it automatic that if you keep your money offshore, that you are necessarily involved in money laundering or any form of corruption?
No, I will start from the last to the first. It is not automatic that once you keep your money offshore, or that you created nominees, that you are shady, or that you are involved in money laundering. But as private individuals, the essence really is for the tax agency to know if this money were monies that were actually generated from, inshore and ferried out without paying taxes on them. Tax laws, tax
avoidance a crime?
Tax avoidance is not a crime, but there are ways you can avoid tax that will lead, you would look at it as though you are avoiding tax, but for the taxman, it is tax evasion. Because if the funds are generated here and they are not declared in your company's annual returns, because every year, just the same way you file, asset declaration as a public officer, every year, your companies filed, annual statement of affairs with the corporate affairs. And so, even filing your annual corporate statement of affairs, and then you're consistently declaring losses, and yet this same man that is declaring losses consistently has, huge money stashed away abroad. There's need for the taxman to look at the processes and say, no, this can't be. Last year you declare losses, but these funds left these shores from here to, one island, and then that money found its way into properties somewhere. And that's why those private individuals are involved. It's not about, if you are a private individual, you can keep your money anywhere. But there's need for the taxman to look at this, the document filed with the corporate affairs, vis-a-vis the revelation that is, on board. How were this money, made? Were they monies made in Nigeria? If there were monies made abroad from, other sources, then there's no business with the taxman here. Then secondly, you find out that in some situations where private businesses, especially private business owner, they would want to take advantage of tax avoidance. In anywhere in the world, every businessman wants to avoid paying taxes. But recently, what the government also did was to say, look, we know that our laws are observed in breach. There are people who have made money here and took this money abroad. Let us give them opportunity to voluntarily declare their assets and income, so that for the purpose of taxes they can come. That was, I think it was the Panama Papers that also influenced that. Let's give them opportunity. And so it was an opportunity also for your financial consultant and your auditors to look at the books and say, well, if there are areas where we have erred as regards tax laws, then there is need for us to come clean. But if you kept quiet and only for, some persons to dig into, your private books and discover that, while you are pretending to be a poor man here, you're actually making money from the system and taking this money away. I will give you a personal experience. And then on the issue of lawyers, in other societies, we saw the case of Ibori. In Ibori's case in London, even his lawyers were prosecuted. But here, lawyers in Nigeria, lawyers and bankers will do anything. They would help clients to, like they say, if you want to keep money and you don't want anybody to look into it, the best way is to employ a lawyer and create the impression that their legal fee. And that's, even in spite of the fact that we have a cap by the Legal Practitioners Act, there are caps. But here, lawyers make billions for just writing letters, and nobody will look into it. They will say it's professional fee. And even the court had said that, the EFCC had no powers to look into a lawyer's fee. If you remember the case of Ozekome, EFCC, and Fayoshe, so that they don't have the powers to look into lawyers' professional fee. But the NBA needs to do more to ensure that, in cleaning the urgent table, also lawyers are consistently sanctioned to make sure that you don't help, corrupt-minded public officers, to hide proceeds that ordinarily, would have been beneficial to government. It is immaterial how much you pay, because you hear in some cases people will say, I paid 20 million as taxes. But the question is, was it the appropriate tax to pay? You could have paid 20 million, while in the real sense, what you ought to pay should be 100 million.
Well, I remember the New York property developer, that billionaire, Leona Helmsley, who said taxes are for little people. The rich always find a way.
Yes, the rich always find a way around it.
Yes.
It's about quality and the strength of institutions.
Yeah.
If those institutions are in themselves weak, and there's no monitoring system.
Yes.
It's not enough to just talk about illicit international financial flow.
That is
we
why
have the mechanism in place.
That is why in Nigeria, no matter how much we talk about it, the Panama Papers came and, gone. This one will come and go. The Halliburton scandal came while those that bribed Nigerian officials were already facing jail term in their country. Here, you find out that those who were involved were in public offices and were still campaigning to hold because the institutions are weak.
On that grim note, we draw the conversation to a close.